Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. I'm worried about Dr. Charles' future after his catastrophic mistake in Chicago Med Season 10, Episode 16. Season 10, Episode 16 of Chicago Med makes Dr. Charles Oliver Platt out to be a hero, but there's a chance his handling of a delicate case will have extreme consequences. Poster child packs in a number of storylines for virtually every character in the Chicago Med cast, with a few of them setting up potentially major plot points. Lennox, Sarah Ramos, and Frost's Darren Barnett. Subplots explore their histories a bit more than Chicago Med Season 10 has thus far, and Ripley's Luke Mitchell suspension arc is officially over. As far as patients are concerned, one of the primary storylines involves Frost and Charles working together to help a young teen named Liam. It's established that Liam has been regularly vomiting despite showing no other signs of illness, and his parents have brought him in to try and figure out the cause. Charles ultimately does get to the root of Liam's illness, but in doing so he makes a call that could affect his story in a major way leading up to Chicago Med Season 11. Although his parents explain that Liam's been dealing with bouts of vomiting for some time, they take him to the hospital because things have gotten bad enough that he's been throwing up blood. Tox screens show ipecac in his system, meaning that Liam's vomiting has been entirely self-induced. He's developing internal lesions as a result, but he's reluctant to explain to Charles why he feels the need to throw up. Liam initially seems to support the theory that he's bulimic, but it quickly becomes apparent that there's something else going on. Before long, Charles reaches the conclusion that Liam is attempting conversion therapy on himself. Charles explains to Frost that there's a specific form of Pavlovian aversion therapy in which homosexuals are made to feel queasy while looking at same-sex imagery. The goal is for them to develop an association between same-sex attraction and nausea so that they'll feel sick whenever they have homosexual thoughts. Liam has been attempting this on himself because his parents don't support his sexual orientation. Charles eventually gets Liam's father to open his mind, but the fallout Charles causes in the process is less than ideal. When Frost learns that Liam is attempting his own conversion therapy, his very first question for Charles is whether Liam needs to be put on a psych hold. Liam's mother likewise assumes this will happen, but Charles decides that holding Liam on the basis of self-harm isn't necessary, because Liam thinks he's fixing himself. Furthermore, he says that holding Liam will affirm the idea that his sexuality makes him worthy of punishment. But Chicago Med's Daniel Charles should know the point of suicide watch is simply to stop the self-harm from recurring. In Liam's case, neglecting to put him on a psych hold might have even done additional damage. Liam's father accepts his son in the end, but his mom praises him for trying to fix a problem on his own. She also tries to take him from the hospital, leading to Liam's father threatening her custody right in front of Liam in the hallway. Liam's mother actively refers to his sexuality as a problem that was going to occur at some point no matter what, but having it happen so publicly is likely to stick with him for some time. If Charles had put Liam on a hold, then his parents' argument could have happened in the hallway without Liam needing to witness it. Any trauma he deals with over being the subject of public shaming is directly on Charles' shoulders. And Charles has already been called into question a few times this season. Reese's Rachel DePillo complaint against Charles wound up being resolved peacefully, but his behavior regarding Jackie, Natalie Z, is ethically questionable at best. It's starting to feel like Ripley is the only character who's ever truly held accountable for anything. Charles really should be held to account for his dishonest role in Jackie's custody hearing more than anything, but any potential fallout from denying Liam's suicide watch would also achieve the end of the doctor answering for his mistakes in Chicago Med. The episode ends with Liam still at Gaffney, so there's every chance the show could bring him back for a follow-up appearance. Even after his father accepts him, Liam still apologizes for not being able to fix himself. That alone says that he's certainly not out of the woods just yet. Dr. Daniel Charles has been the bedrock of Chicago Med's psychiatric department for years, a guiding light for both patients and colleagues. But in Season 10, Episode 16, he made a catastrophic mistake, one so severe that it threatens his career, his reputation, and even his own mental well-being. As I watched the episode unfold, my concern for Dr. Charles grew exponentially. It all started with a patient named Jordan Foster, a young woman who had been struggling with schizoaffective disorder for years. She had been in and out of various hospitals, her condition worsening with each stay. Dr. Charles had worked with her before and had always been able to pull her back from the brink. But this time, something was different. Dr. Charles had been dealing with his own demons, his ex-wife's sudden reappearance in his life, the increasing administrative pressure from hospital board members, and the gnawing feeling that after decades in the field, he might finally be losing his edge. He was distracted, exhausted, and perhaps even overconfident in his ability to navigate Jordan's condition. Jordan came into the ER in a full-blown psychotic episode. Her mother, desperate and at her wits' end, begged Dr. Charles to help her daughter. Dr. Charles, ever the compassionate professional, assured her that he would take care of it. But instead of taking the time to fully assess the situation, he made a rash decision, one that would lead to disastrous consequences. He prescribed Jordan a high dose of an antipsychotic medication that had previously worked for her, but this time her body reacted violently. Within minutes, she went into neuroleptic malignant syndrome, a rare but life-threatening reaction to antipsychotic drugs. Her muscles locked up, her fever spiked, and she collapsed into seizures. The ER went into full panic mode as Dr. Charles stood frozen, realizing the gravity of his mistake. Dr. Archer and Dr. Marcel rushed to stabilize Jordan, but the damage had been done. She slipped into a coma, and the prognosis was grim. Jordan's mother, once an ally of Dr. Charles, now looked at him with nothing but betrayal and fury. She demanded answers, demanded accountability. The hospital administration wasted no time launching an internal review. Dr. Charles found himself sitting in a cold conference room, facing a panel of his peers as they dissected every decision he had made. Some colleagues defended him, citing his years of dedicated service and his impeccable track record. Others, however, were less forgiving. The press caught wind of the story, and soon, Dr. Charles' name was being dragged through the mud in medical circles. The whispers started, was he losing his touch? Had he grown too comfortable, too careless? Meanwhile, Dr. Charles himself was crumbling. He replayed the moment over and over in his head, unable to reconcile the fact that his actions had led to such a devastating outcome. He had always been so careful, so meticulous. How had he missed the warning signs? He began to withdraw, avoiding the ER, avoiding his colleagues, even avoiding Sharon Goodwin, his closest confidant. Dr. Charles' guilt was compounded when Jordan's mother filed a malpractice lawsuit against him. The weight of it all became unbearable. For the first time in his long career, he contemplated resigning. What good was a psychiatrist who could no longer trust his own judgment? As the weeks passed, the hospital's internal investigation came to a close. The review board found that while Dr. Charles had indeed made a serious error, there were extenuating circumstances: his overwhelming workload, the lack of proper support in the psych department, and the increasing pressure from hospital administrators to push patients through the system faster. Still, the damage was done. Dr. Charles was given a 6-month suspension and ordered to undergo additional psychiatric training and supervision. It was a humiliating blow for someone of his stature, but he accepted it without protest. The real question now is, what does the future hold for Dr. Charles? Will he be able to recover from this setback, or is this the beginning of the end for him at Chicago Med? His confidence has been shattered, and his colleagues, while sympathetic, may never look at him the same way again. Dr. Charles has always been the one guiding others through their darkest moments, but now, he finds himself in unfamiliar territory. Can he find a way to forgive himself? Can he rebuild the trust he's lost? Or will this mistake haunt him forever, leading him down a path from which he can't return? One thing is certain, the road ahead for Dr. Daniel Charles will not be an easy one, and as a fan of Chicago Med, I can only hope that he finds his way back before it's too late.